Hello, everyone. Everyone here, thank you for coming, and everyone online. Hope you're watching and ask questions in the Slido because we'll do Q&A after if there's time. So we have a very special guest. We have Ash from SMG Studio. SMG has like moving out. I know I talk about moving out a lot this week. I don't know why. Moving out. Fast and Furious Mobile. Oh my God, there's so many. Death Squad, Risk. Anyone else know any of them? Sping. One more line. I reckon Ash is going to talk all about them. So he's here to give you some lessons learnt from running a game studio. Enjoy.
Yeah, I don't have any audio or videos, but I've just got some slides. I will preface this that it's going to be lessons learned from running a digital agency turned into a studio, because SMG was founded in 2013, but I've actually been running a company since 2002. So between 2002 and 2018, I started a company called Soap Creative. This is just some of the suite of the adver games we used to make. So I originally founded this company as like, I just want to make games. And then I found out how much you get paid to make a banner ad, and I was like, well, I'll do banner ads as well. And then I used to blog, and I'd be like, oh, I'm actually okay at social media, so I did social media, and it became a digital agency based on that. But I would get more money to make one banner ad, which I could do in a day, than I would get to making a Flash game back in those days. So that's just some of the kind of the type of games we made. Very adver game, very commercial, but that was informative my life. The soap brand ended in 2018. It was merged with Isobar, but it lives on in a soap factory in Cairns. The designer who designed our logo sent me that saying they've ripped off your logo and it's in a soap factory at the Cairns, or at that point it was at the Cairns airport. So I thought that was really funny. It still lives on. And this was, and so what happened in 2018 or around 2013 was, this was me. I'm on a podcast about the media metrics for digital advertising. And that's how excited I am when I'm straddling between games and digital agency, and I realize like actually I just want to do more and more games now, because I'm actually sick of talking about banner ads and metrics. Is 3 seconds enough to count as a view on Facebook and stuff? All of those things are hot topics in the ad world. So that was me. Kind of like I'm so over this. I wish I was just back to making games. So SMG was founded in 2013. That's kind of like the suite of our kind of rollout of titles over that time. We opened up a Melbourne office in 2018. We have a US office in 2019. Soap had a US office before. Long story, but that's kind of projects. And you can kind of see the type of games and the kind of rollout of titles. This is when Corona hit, and then just what our kind of suite of games that we've released. And we're about 70 people now across multiple locations. We all work from home pretty much, but we have offices in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and we have a space in LA as well. I'm on the Gold Coast now. But yeah, kind of 70 people now, so it's quite large. But I've learned a lot from my soap days. That's carried across to SMG. And so I really just want to talk about some of the business stuff, because I think when you're running a studio, basically, it's a lot more business stuff than there is game stuff. So for anyone that wants to start a studio, or maybe just joining a studio, hopefully this will give you a little bit more context as to what goes on at the top level, so you can have a little bit more understanding and appreciation, and maybe like I can steer you away from starting a studio, or actually this will actually get you more excited. The first question I have is like, do you want to make, I didn't put games, I put, do you want to make stuff? Do you want to run a business, or do you want to be famous? Because you can't really do, I mean, you can try to do all three, but there's a lot of people who they say they want to run a business, but actually they just want to make stuff. Like they don't want to do any of the businessy stuff. They're like, I just want to make games. And right now, I don't really make games, I run a business. Or they just want to be famous, like, oh, I just want to do talks like this, and I just want to travel the world and stuff. I actually don't really want to make anything, and I don't want to run a business. So you might be like me, you're getting older, and you're like, how did I even get here? Like, I thought I was making games, I thought I was having fun, but actually I'm running a business. So that's the question you need to ask yourself as well, because there's a lot of people who are really good at making games and really bad at running a business, and vice versa. There's people, like I've met other founders where it's like the person is actually a business person. They're like, oh yeah, I teamed up with the IT guy who told me to make games, so we started a business together. And that actually works really well, because one person handles the business, one person handles the games, and that works well. And the main thing when you're starting a business is, who are your other founders? Are you doing it solo, and what's their life stage? This is really important when you think, because starting a business isn't just a 12-month thing. It should be, I started Soap in 2002. I didn't even imagine what it would be like in 2023. It was just like, oh, we can start our own business. If it doesn't work well, we'll just go get another job. What's their life stage? Are they living at home? Are they used to just like, Mum, where's the meatloaf? They're just, living at home. They have no self-management skills and stuff. Or they're like me, you've got kids and a wife and you've got a family. Or are they like, they just want to jet set? Because you might be like, oh, I want to start a business. They go, great. And then 2 years in, they're like, oh, I want to travel the world. I want to jet set. And you're like, well, we've got to run this business. Like, we can't do both. So you need to think of who your founders are, what life stage they're at, because that will affect you. You have to think 5, 10, 20 years down the track. Like, are we close aligned, or are we going to slowly drift apart? And if some big life stage thing happens, that's going to cause conflict. So you really need to think about your founders and where they are. And with that, like, plan for success day one. That was a big lesson I learned. If I had have known that we would sell soap, I think it was like 2015, and all the success we'd have, I definitely would have founded the business a lot differently. And one of that would have been, setting it up in Singapore, or having it in a family trust owned by another co. Because if you have it all under your personal name, it creates a lot of tax issues and other things like that. It's really hard to then diversify yourself out of that. What's your exit strategy? Even having an exit strategy, like when we started, I didn't even think like we would sell the business and what that would mean. The easy one to kind of know is like, is it a proprietary limited or a partnership? I've seen a lot of people going like, oh, we'll just start a business and it's a partnership. That's a terrible idea because you're all personally liable. There's no tax advantage there and stuff like that. But that's very risky because the short answer is if you and another person start a partnership and the other person then causes a massive amount of debt and causes some issues, you're both liable personally for that. So you could be paying off debts. Whereas if it's P2I Ltd, you can go, well, that's the company's issue. So plan for success day one, and that's have some advice and have a think about like, man, imagine if we sold this company for $100 million, what would that mean? And then you go back and like, actually, I'd like to set it up in Singapore. Or if we're having this huge success, like, yeah, I don't want to pay Australian tax rate. Let's go to the Cayman Islands, as a lot of crypto companies have done. And that's being a little bit facetious there, but think about that success as well. Like, what does that mean? Because once you've got down the track, you can't unravel those very easily without paying a huge amount of tax or hassle. And also plan for failure as well. Not just in bankruptcy or things going badly, but you may have to you may have to get rid of one of your founders. So when we started Soap, we had 4 founders. Within 6 months, one of the founders went to the UK to follow his girlfriend. And so he left, and then another one came in, and then 5, 8 years later, we had to forcibly, not to this degree, but pretty much, where one of the founders was taking drugs, doing things that shouldn't have been done, frauding the company, and you just think like, oh, defrauding the company, you just go, see you later. That doesn't work that way because it's like, see you later, and here's a big lot of money to pay them out of the business because they own that part of the business. Whether they're doing fraud or not, you can't just kick them out going, oh, you didn't do the right rules, see you later. Be like, oh, but I own 25% of the company, so give me money. So you have to be ready for that failure as well. Like, what happens in that situation if something goes wrong? And you really have to have these tough conversations. These could happen a year in. The longer and more successful the business is, the harder it is. For us, like when it pay out one of the founders, for the next 3 years, I was literally, all the money was going to that person that was no longer in the business. All the profit was just going to pay off this person that we had to forcibly remove. So it was a bit weird. Again, what's your exit strategy? And just having a rule as to what's the value of the business at any time. So if somebody leaves in 6 months, they go, oh, well, there's $50,000 in the bank. I own half the business, so just give me $25,000, right? It doesn't work that way. Or you might get someone say, oh, we've released this game and someone wants to buy the IP and that's worth $50 million. And then they go, cool, I want out, so give me $25 million because it's worth that. And you're like, well, we don't have $50 million. It's not, we haven't been paid that. And to do that, we'd have to sell the IP. So there's a lot of plan for failure in terms of have those tough conversations when you start a business. It's basically have the good conversations, have the bad conversations very early on. Because that's hurt us in the past. The other one is get insurance. And one anecdotal thing, like we had a US office, we did a website for a game, we used to do marketing for game publishers. So we did a website for a big, massive game publisher. we did a website, and in the background of that website, this was HTML, someone took 2 photos from the internet and put them on the website. Didn't get the rights for them and stuff. The photographer, however he found it, found those 2 photos on the background, like we're talking like in the background, like very small background of the website, and said, you've used my images illegally, I'm suing you for damages. 2 images, $150,000 US each for the cost and rights for that. And you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. If we were to license that photo, it'd be $5,000, maybe $10,000. Yeah, sure, but I want $150,000 each. Otherwise, I'm suing your publisher. The big global publisher's like, we don't go to court. That's your fault. You settle. And so yeah, so that website, which we probably got 80 grand for, we then had to pay out $300,000 of just for using two photos. The person in the US was like, spoke to the photographer and said, well, obviously we had to pay that money, but we also want a nicely framed version of each photo. So there were very expensive photos there, but get insurance because that can cover you for that stuff. But even then, it doesn't always cover you because it's your fault. But yeah, so these are all like business basics, but I think just because it's games doesn't mean you don't take business seriously. And if these all things are like, oh man, that just sounds really annoying, I don't want to do any of that, then don't start a business. Like if you find doing your tax every year is like, oh, I've got to fill out my receipts and all that stuff, then don't start a business because that's what you end up doing as a business leader, is doing all this kind of annoying paperwork stuff. Broadly, like being fair and honest, and for me, is a really good long-term business strategy. This is just the cohort from my team that I've worked with for more than 10 years, and we've had people come back as well. It's really good knowing that that they know that if you promise something, you will deliver on that no matter what. It's not like these people don't stick around when you're always like, oh, I wish I could have done that, but things are out of my hands. Like you only promise things that you can actually deliver on, and you're also being fair and honest. It's not, you're not treating people differently. It's like you just be very fair. It's very easy to be fair and honest, so you don't get strung up in lies where people are finding out stuff because your team will talk. So it's just be straight up honest, straight up fair, and that's just any business. But it definitely helps you as a business strategy to have a continuous long career. Because yeah, you just don't want to have people thinking like, oh, well, Ash will say something and then he'll change it. No, Ash, like if Ash says, like if I say, look, I can't give you that now, but let's talk in 6 months, they know that you'll be able to deliver on that. And the other thing is don't say yes to everything. So that was me talking at the IAB metrics thing. You don't have to say yes to everything. It's very easy when you start a business or anything to say yes to every single opportunity. And that's actually going to keep you, you'll end up just being too flustered and like, oh, I'm not actually making the games, I'm just saying yes to all these opportunities. So, we're helping some devs now with like, not publishing, but just kind of helping them bring games to market. And they'll be like, oh, I've been offered to go to this conference to do this. So, oh, I'm in the finalists in this thing, I've got to fly here. And it's like, I'm like, you've got to finish the game. Stop flying around the world and spending all your savings just to go to these events when you haven't even shipped the game. And so it's just like pick your kind of the best opportunities there, then try and think, I'll never get this opportunity again. It's like, you will, they're not going to go away. And the other one is like, also don't say no to everything as well. There's the opposite there. That was when we did Red Bull Flugtag. That's my feet popping out of the back there. And that's not a great example of the game, but which is like, that was a really fun corporate activity. But if you say no to everything, then you'll miss some opportunities. So it is a balance of which ones you say yes to and which ones you say no. But you just can't be so binary. It's like, okay, well, I'm just literally just going to focus on the game and not talk to anyone. You have to have a bit of a gut instinct as to what you should say yes to. That's the fail. To give you a time frame, that was the fail whale. That was our costume. Well, that was our Flugtag thing there. Just in terms of, and this is for games. This works for game studios. It works for Soap before. Is have a unique and shared kind of culture. For us, these used to be the superheroes, and that worked. It doesn't really roll off the tongue like the SMG heroes, but after you pass your 6-month probation, you get to choose a hero, or a villain, or just a character to represent you. And we have a rule of like, no one can choose the same one. So even if one of those people have left, or Pep's still here, but like Indiana Jones leaves, and someone says, "Oh, can I be Indiana Jones?" It's like, no, that person was that character, 12 years ago. And so you kind of get these more esoteric characters as well. But it's a really nice kind of binding, cultural thing. This is quite cheap to do. We're putting the artist in Ecuador. We're putting all these kids through college with these ones. because he's been making them for years for us, and he's literally started a business of making these for other companies. But this is just one small thing in many things into a culture that can kind of bind people together. And as Soap, we used to give these to clients as well. We'd make one for a client and give them like a water bottle or a T-shirt and stuff with their character on it. So it's a really fun way. And when you look through Slack and everyone's got their characters, it's just an extra insight into their personality. But you do need to craft, as a studio or a company, as a business, like craft your own unique culture. Don't try and be like, oh, this is our other, you can have you can let your personality get through when you're starting a business. And that was just one small example there. And for me, like being comfortable being a boss took a really long time. Hashtag not all bosses, because there's a lot of rhetoric about bad bosses. Like these are two posters I would see on the way to work in Ultimo, and to be honest, like this really makes me doubt myself. It's like, oh, are we the baddies? Am I the baddie? And I remember on one thing I was like, I'm seeing all this stuff about bad bosses, but like, that's not me. Like, it feels weird to like dump us all into this one thing. And someone was like, yeah, hashtag not all bosses. I didn't realize they're making fun of me. It was like, not all men type thing. I was like, okay, we can all do better. But just being comfortable with the word, oh, I'm the boss. That took me a really long time to like, I'm putting on my boss hat to be comfortable. So I was like, oh no, we're all at the same level, blah, blah, blah. And then people tell me like, Ash, you can be, as much as you think you're a nice guy, you can be intimidating, or you are the boss. So when you say something, it holds weight. And I'll be like, oh, because I just treat everyone kind of on an equal level. Like, let's all have a discussion, not realizing my own privilege as being the boss. So you have to be comfortable in being a boss, and it doesn't have to be from day one. And then there's the opposite, where you're just a really arsehole boss, where you're like, well, I'm the boss, so what I say goes. But that was a real tonal shift for me, just being comfortable like being a boss. And so if you're not comfortable doing that, like don't start a business, because you have to be a boss sometimes. You have to wear that hat. It can't be a democracy. There's been people on my team that's like, oh, they want every decision voted on. Like what are we doing? Everything needs to be voted equally, and that's just the worst way to run a business, where it's not a democracy. I call it like a respectful dictatorship. It's like, I'll hear all the voices. I want to hear what you have to say. But I'm the boss. I have to make a decision on this, because ultimately, it's my responsibility, not like everyone vote on something. I did a roundtable with the SMG team a while ago, and I was like, okay, what's the next type of game, or what type of games do you want to make, and what do you want to do? What are you interested in? If I'd have done what everyone wanted, we would have gone under, because we're all trying to make the next Witcher. So like, oh, I'd love to make a game like Witcher, or like a action RPG, and like it was like almost a round table, like everyone wanted to do that, and at the end of it, I was like, well, first off, like, I don't even think back, we're not making a action massive RPG. Like, our studio is not built for that, and that's too risky, and we'll go out of business. But if I just had everyone vote, it'd be like, I guess we're making a Witcher RPG, and then, yeah, we wouldn't be here today. And that's the main thing, is like, you can't make everyone happy. It'll be like, everyone, I bought Passiona. Like, everyone's excited, like, oh, I want a Pasino. It's like, it's the same. But, you can never make everyone happy, and that's really hard sometimes for me to kind of, when you put, like, I use this as an example because I love Passiona, I love Pasito as well, but like, okay, rather than just getting everyone boring drinks, I'm going to get my favorite drink so they can kind of share that. And people complain about that. It's like, oh, I don't like passion fruit flavor. And you're like, oh, but not, just realizing you're never going to make everyone happy. So how do you be comfortable with that? On the same sense, you can make everyone angry. If it's like, oh, all we're having in the studio is Dr. Pepper. One other example of that, we were invited on an ABC TV show called ABC Do or Die, where they took companies and put them, and we actually went up to Broome, so this is a WA story. They take companies and they put them in the bush and they see how they survive. And so we were the tech gaming, or we were the tech company. They had a bar and they had like a family business and stuff, and they put you out of your comfort zone. So it was me and 4 or 5 others, and we're in the bush, surviving. And I think all we ate through that whole 4 days was like a couple of tin cans of baked beans. Like, we were given tasks and we won food and stuff, so very limited food and stuff. And at the office, we used to have a weekly barbecue where we'd cook meals and stuff. And I said, oh, for this Friday, why don't we just have a do or die meal session where we're only going to eat what our team ate for that whole week, which is baked beans, like really like boring stuff. And everyone here is like, I'm not eating fucking baked beans. I want my barbecue. Like, that's cool you did that, Ash, but like, that's really a bad idea. So, I was trying to be like, oh, let's all connect on the level that we were at. I made everyone angry about that, trying to get everyone to eat baked beans. So you can easily make everyone angry. So, if you can't make everyone happy, at least you're going to hit a higher percentage. And like a lot of this stuff, it's really hard not to take this stuff personally. I used to tell people when they join the company, it's like when you invite someone to, like, imagine you're having a party or even an event like this, you're saying, I'm going to have a party, it's going to be an awesome party, going to be good music, good food, and everyone gets excited. And if someone doesn't have a good time, you're like, oh, I put everything into it. So when you're hiring people into your company, it's really hard not to take that personally when they say, oh, I wish this had been better or this would be good, because there's so many factors that go into running a business, and it can be really easy. Like I did this, like to take it personally and be defensive and stuff. So that I'm still working on that for sure. But that's definitely a big thing. Is like when you run a business, especially if you're the founder or one of the core founders, it becomes it becomes part of your personality, and you really will take it personally. So you have to be ready for that as well, and kind of boost up your emotional intelligence to kind of be aware of that. And I see, and same with the kind of boss stuff, I see stuff like this, profits are unpaid wages. I don't mind when it says record profits are unpaid wages, but when it's then rejigged as like all profits are unpaid wages, and you see this kind of shared around, whether it's in games or other things, and it's like, that is not how a business runs. If we paid out every dollar that we got in, we'd be out of business. There was times at Soap where, again, I personally had to pay all the salaries for a couple of months because cash flow issues. The other founders had mortgages and had some issues. But those profits are there so we can expand the team, so we can have flexibility. So when I can say to the teams like, well, that deadline we have, we're going to push it back because we have that buffer. But if you go with this rhetoric and see, people thinking this, so it's, when you are running a business, there are people saying like, I'm going to start a business, I'm going to run it how it should be run, where it's like, all profits are paid, 100% out. It's like the Valhalla of running a game studio. You realize the reality is like this type of stuff is actually really harmful because it makes people feel resentful, like, oh, my company made a profit and I couldn't get a pay rise and stuff. It's like, I'm actually trying to protect the greater ecosystem of the business. So just be aware, like you learn a lot of this stuff, and it's like actually, you kind of, you take it personally, where it's like, look, I'm not trying to rip anyone off. I'm trying to protect the sanctity of this business so we can make decisions, better decisions. Again, cash flow is a killer for a lot of businesses. Doesn't matter whether you're as you can see, builders are going under. But having cash or having good cash flow definitely makes life easier. And you won't get that if you're paying out every single dollar that comes in. So, you have to be ready to have like a kitty and a pool of money there ready to go. So if things go wrong, if things go wrong, you don't have to like fire people straight away, or you're not making rash decisions. You make very different decisions when you have good cash flow and cash in the bank than when it's literally coming down to the wire and it's like, well, we have to ship this game in 3 months or our business is going out of business, or look, we've got enough, we've got another year's runway, 2 years runway, so we can make smarter decisions. So these are all things you have to consider, and like I think sometimes there's a little bit of idealization of like, when I start a business, I'm just going to run it so fairly and it's going to be fully democratic and that's the way it should be run. And then you get the harsh realities, like you have to really run it like a proper business. That was from PAX US, when we're selling pennies and stuff and everyone pays cash. The other one, and this is true for any kind of business, is make friends and influence people. This is the 2013 PAX Seattle. This was when we had OTTTD at an Intel booth. So that was a whole booth section. I had half a day. And this was one of the formative moments where it's like, okay, now I definitely want to move out of, so I was straddling between SMG and SOAP, so digital advertising and games. When I went to this one, saw the Indie Mega booth, and that it really made me go, I need to go full-time into games because I'm having a great time. The difference being in digital advertising as SOAP, people would say, hey, it's Ash from SOAP. And people would know me and I had a reputation because, I built up a profile. I came into games as like, Ash from SMG, and at that point, no one had any idea who we were. And it was really interesting having different conversations because I didn't have that, people are talking to me because of who I am at SOAP and they're kissing my ass and stuff. I was literally able to see the real people because there was no value in talking to me at that point. So it was actually really interesting having different conversations where it's like, these people have no idea who I am and talking to me like I've never done any business stuff. And it was, you could tell who was quite real and who was kind of phony there. But again, it was about making friends, and that's the whole book, Make Friends and Influence People. Funny story, I dislocated my arm at a Far Cry 4 wrestling event. I was wrestling some 21-year-old, like you dress up in this big animal suit and we wrestled, and I pulled my arm out, and that really hurt. And then so I spent the rest of the event with a sore arm. But I did meet, and I met multiple times before. I met Trent from League of Geeks, and I met Morgan and Kim from Defiant, and Panya, and Ben from Mini Mega, and that's Eric, who's from Square Enix, but it was also my client at Activision at that time. But the first interactions I had with Morgan and Trent were really, they were really open to helping and giving advice, and I think they were really formative. Like, in advertising, it's very close, like you're all fighting for the same clients. It's a very zero-sum game. So it's like, you're my enemy because you're going to steal my client or you're going to steal my staff. Whereas in games, it's a global economy. So those interactions I had with Morgan and Trent were like, you can share contacts, you can share insights, and they really were formative moments. And Ben and Panya from Mini Mega, just really down to earth. And I was like, these are my people, and I just wanted to kind of replicate that as I'm going forward, like sharing knowledge and contacts where we can. And I think it's really good to make those friends early on, or have those good formative moments, because there's the flip side. If you met the wrong people where they're very closed guarded, you go like, that's how it works, right? No one shares any information. It's all my contacts, and that can be like a vicious cycle. So having people like Morgan and Trent and Kim and that really helped open my eyes, and I tried to replicate that moving forward as well. But it can be lonely being a boss as well. You can kind of see the trend here. Because when you're the boss, and I was saying to someone earlier that, as the boss, I hear people say, hey, I'm going to be sick because something very terrible has happened to my family. And I'm like, that's awful, yeah, just take the time off. And then the next day something else will happen. And you're the only one hearing this information because obviously you want to keep it private. And that's really emotionally draining, because it's like, wow, I'm taking on all this like emotional load because people are having like some very terrible things happen in their life. And that can be really lonely. So the other one is like, find some other bosses to celebrate with. So I do have chat groups with other, game leaders. We had the same at SOAP with the digital agencies. All the agency heads would get together and just have a talk like this once a month, and have a guest speaker, and just be a time to kind of complain about staff, complain about clients, complain about everything at a different level than, because you can't really complain about your staff to your staff. As a boss, I can't go on Twitter or social media and complain about my staff being annoying. My staff can do that, and I have to read it. So where do you have that outlet? Otherwise, it becomes quite emotionally. So yeah, find other bosses or find other people at your level that you can kind of share with, and and nurture that. And again, share openly as well, because it is that kind of it's that shared experience where you go, it's not just me having the same issue. It seems to be a systemic thing. So that's kind of like, that. No matter what business you're running, I feel like that advice carries across. But let's do some actual game-specific stuff, because I feel like I've got a bit of knowledge there. But also note that when we started SMG in 2013, it's not the same as it is in 2013. So take any advice with a grain of salt. And I also say, like, if you see advice from me and someone else contradicts it, you can question any advice you get. But if some of the stuff I'm saying you've heard parroted from other people, then take that on board as well, because everyone's experiences are different. So, but I will say that starting a studio now is very different than in 2013. The biggest advice, and you hear this all the time, is just make smaller games. This was at PAX where someone had obviously making a ball pit and stuff, but people were like, okay, I'm going to make a ball pit, so I better buy every ball that I can buy, because it's going to be the best ball pit ever. So like, don't be this person where it's like, yes, you probably can afford that many balls, but it's not going to make it a better ball pit. So just make smaller games. Or, and sometimes, look, I can fit the toast in the toaster, and it's going to toast it, but it's going to be really annoying. But just shaving off just a little bit could really, make life much easier. So just make smaller games. Like that's how SMG started. We're making bigger games now, but we also still make smaller games. Like that's the biggest advice. You hear that all the time from students as well, to students. Have interests outside of games. I can't stress this enough. Just a quick example. So I used to make custom Mr. Potato heads, Mr. Potato Mash. That's my Kill Bill one. I did these all before Hasbro even did them, and when I went visited Hasbro with Risk, they were like, oh, we've seen your ones in our internal presentations. I had Earth wallpapers. I ran a blog about album cover art, where I used to research and blog about awesome cover art. I'd take photography at Mardi Gras with my. I'd take photography of abandoned couches. I used to run a blog called Banner Blog about banner advertising. That blog took me around the world. I've judged at Cannes. I've judged in Cannes in France. Judged around the world because I was like the expert of banner ads at that point. And I love photography as well. So that's that's not a huge diverse thing, but there's people where it's like, oh yeah, I love games. I love game music. My favorite, I love classical music. Yeah, like Hollow Knight soundtrack and Final Fantasy, and their whole world is just games, and it's really boring. And they're not actually interesting people. Whereas we've had people on our team like, they've joined our team as like, oh, I used to be a ballerina. I was in a dance company in Northern Territory. Like for me, that's part of the diversity in games as well. Is like this. Oh, I used to be a chef in Europe. So someone who used to be a chef in Europe and now works in games has a different life experience. But just have other interests outside of just games. It's actually can help a lot, just in terms of life experience or just things to talk about as well. Because I find advertising is a bit different because people do get obsessed with advertising, but they've got a lot wider range of interests. But games, there's some subset where they just love games and that's all they talk about. And it's quite, it's like, I don't know, like the composer from Final Fantasy, but I know, yeah, it's weird. Big one, and this is my personal opinion, is creativity is much easier to fight in than craft. I don't know if anyone's seen BJ Novak's book, The Book with No Pictures. That's an amazing kids book that has no pictures. So imagine you going in and it's like, I'm going to make the best kids book ever, and obviously, it's got to have some beautiful illustrations, and it's got to have this amazing, big, expansive story. It's like, no, read this book. It's amazing because the idea and the creativity behind it is much better than the craft. Like some of the typography is a bit, but it's still pretty good. But for me, when we make games, it's like we can never fight we can never be as good as The Last of Us 2 or Naughty Dog or those ones. For me, that's nuclear war. They're working with nuclear weapons. They're at that level. Whereas like on the creativity side, that's like a street fight. Pocket sand. Kick them when they're down. With creativity, you can have a street fight. You can really like win out. Are we going to be better than Naughty Dog? Hell no, not at all. But can we be more creative and have more interesting ideas? Definitely. Check out like Insomniac as well. Check out Insomniac's mobile games. They're terrible. And Insomniac are an amazing studio because we did advertising for them. Insomniac are actually the really nice ones, but they didn't do very good mobile games. But they do amazing, like Spider-Man: The Craft, and that is amazing. And I have this like you've got the triangle of like fast, good, and cheap. This is my kind of triangle of like coming up with ideas. It's like, okay, I want it to be original, and I want it to be safe. Okay, well, it's not going to be very interesting. But I want it to be original, and I want it to be interesting. Like no one's ever done it before, and I want it to be really interesting. Well, it's probably not going to be safe. Because there's a lot of people who don't want to be, they always want something safe. So it's like, if you want safe and interesting, then it's probably not going to be original, because you're just going to copy some other existing idea out there. So for me, this is like my creativity triangle. Because yeah, if you try and do all three, you won't. Because it's like, I want it to be original, safe, and interesting. It's not going to happen. Because if it's original, it's never been done before, and it's very safe, well, then it's not very interesting. So for me, creativity, and I tell this to people with their portfolios as well. I look at a lot of portfolios, and sometimes I'm more enamored by the idea than their execution. And then I find out like that they didn't come up with the idea. They just like, oh, the concept art was by this person. I just did the 3D, and it's like, I really liked the idea. I didn't like, the execution was fine, but the idea is what I liked. And so for me, original ideas and creativity is much more valuable, and it's much easier to get a job having original ideas than it is being the best at something. And so that's a big one. And for us as a studio, I'd rather come up with new gameplay loops and new game mechanics than just trying to make the best polished version of something out there. Don't worry about the details as well. It's very easy to sweat in games, like every single minute detail. And you can see, look, I've got a full stop on the end of that one, whereas all the other ones didn't have one. Whereas there'd be other people who'd be like, well, you need to go back and edit that. This one doesn't even have a GIF or a meme or anything. It's like, it doesn't matter. So there's some, like a lot of times, I think even, I heard this from Trent, but this was from the God of War guy. What is it? Oh, whatever his name is. I'm saying always a 7, sometimes a 10. You know, I think the studios that always want to be a 10. Everything's got to be a 10 out of 10. Everything's got to be perfect, and that would just be a downfall. Not even being a perfectionist, but just like never go below a 7. But sometimes do a go for a 10, and knowing where to put that energy. You know, I call it like front of house or back of house. There'll be times where we're worrying about some details, and it's like it's so back of house. It's like you're not going to see it. You see it on one screen. It's not worth the time. There's other things like character creations and stuff that they see a lot of, or the first thing they see. That's where we put the effort. So it's very easy to worry about every tiny little minute detail when you don't have to. And like I heard this earlier today, you know, play test with random people as soon as possible and regularly. For moving out one, you know, these are all, each one of these is a different playtest video that we recorded. We did about 250 for moving out one. This is my wife's friends playtesting Death Squared, and these are some of the regular playtest sessions we're running now for another project. We like for moving out 2, we were playtesting after 3 months of dev, you know, and doing it all the time and reviewing those videos regularly, and it's hugely informative. There was a video, maybe it was a couple of years ago, like that is Valve's secret weapon is their playtest, and I totally agree. It's like the more you playtest, whether it's the first 15 minutes, the FATUI, the first time user experience, or just the overall, like, are they getting things? It's super important. So that has been a huge part of, I think, our success with Sping and One More Line and moving out, just the amount of playtesting we did to smooth out that onboarding. We just helped Finity get to Apple Arcade. They'd pitched that to Apple a year before, and Apple's like, this is great, but you know, it's not for us. We looked at it and it's like, this game's really fun, but the first 3 levels are just really hard. It's like a puzzle game, but like, it's really hard. It's really, the onboarding of it's really, really tough. So we did some play testing, we fixed up the onboarding, and Apple like, oh no, we love it now. You know, and because Apple won't tell you, you know, what to fix in a game, they'll just say it's not for us, because if they tell you to fix it, and then they come back later and they still don't want it, you'll be like, but you told me to fix it, I'm gonna sue you, or something, you know. So again, playtesting, you know, saved that game, and it was just watch, and it's record either the audio or hear the people thinking, just the video itself. I've seen a lot of people do playtesting like, oh, they filled out a form and the game went from a 7 to a 7.2, so we're getting better, and it means absolutely nothing, because asking someone to say like, how fun was that out of 1 to 7? I don't care if they had fun. I'll gauge that they've had fun by the amount of laughing or if they're high-fiving each other and those type of things. So playtesting, if you can, probably some of these, like, you can see the people in the corner, or at least the audio so you can hear what they're thinking, and you just say, I want you to talk out what you're doing. So when my wife and that were playing Death Squared and they're laughing or they're arguing with each other, like that's a big tick, you know, to know that it's working, or how far they get through, or whether you say like, oh look, thanks for playtesting, no need to, no, we're good. And they're like, no, let's keep playing. That's a good sign. We never had anyone fill out any forms from these. We just watched the videos. There's another service called Playtest Cloud, which is great for mobile games where you can see where their fingers moving and stuff. But yeah, it's super important. And we now got Terry up in Brisbane doing a lot more advanced playtests where we record them, and you know, it's like picture in picture. It's that body language is really good as well, because like, you can see by 15 minutes in they're already a little bit bored here, or you can see on her face she's really confused, or he's just not engaged at all because he lost the first couple of rounds and not in. So that body language is very informative that they probably wouldn't have picked up on filling out a form. We've worked with publishers where they'll do a playtest and they'll charge $5,000 to $10,000 to run a playtest session like that. So if you can do that on your own, even if it's half as good, it's going to save you a lot of money. Oh yeah, and that's it. I tell playtesting to all devs now, but that's probably the secret sauce. But yeah, that's me, and yeah, time for questions. I probably ran through that oh no, that's all right. I thought I ran through that really fast. But yeah, happy to answer some questions either now or after.
If there's no questions in the audience, oh cool. We've got a couple online as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, that was amazing. I've come from a business background. I think that was totally relevant on so many levels to teach people. 2 quick questions. First of all, when you talked about the triangle looking at originality and creativity and the safety, so I couldn't grasp if you obviously don't want to really grab the all three. Like if you can get all three, that's magic. But do you often, or do you have someone who comes in and says, right, I'm going to be the boring analyst who decides if this is risk adverse or not, and go for original interesting?
It's more just a framework to think about it, because if you've got an original, like no one's ever done this before, and it's so safe that it's commercially going to be a success, it's probably it's more just to go like, is it really that interesting? Are we missing something there? Or if it's like, I want to be really interesting and original, it's like it's probably unsafe. Either it's unsafe topic-wise or commercially. And so indie games, there's a lot of original interesting ones, and where they're getting the detriment is like because they're not safe. And so you have to know that like some games will not be safe. So we used to pitch this to show this to clients as well. Where it's like, I want an award-winning idea. I want it to be like never seen before, and also, look, I can't risk any budget. It needs to be really safe. Like you can't do that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So it's just an extra framework there. So yeah, a lot of indie games are like original, and interesting, which they should be. But yeah, you're at risk. You're putting like no one's ever done this game loop. No one's ever done this subject matter before. Like that's pretty unsafe. But if you do the opposite, then it's like, hey, it's really safe, but it's actually interesting. It's like, well, that's because it's been done before. Yeah. So there's nothing bad about that as well. It's just knowing like, is your game, like I think a lot of games are much more comfortable not being original. In advertising, it was very much, what's the big idea that's never been done before? Yeah. And that was, originality was the main thing awards were won on. And everyone would be like, oh, I've seen that. People would be like, I saw that idea at 10 years ago at Cannes, like just rip that off. Whereas in games, there's not that kind of thing. So.
And then just a quick one in the startup space and the new business, and that was really great, your tips there. Would you mind maybe just a little bit more going into cash flow? Because I know a lot of the businesses I work with, they don't really understand what the term means, and like maybe give an example about how you came to understand it and to avoid, for example, you expect an invoice is going to be paid, so cash flow is good, but then that doesn't, that.
Yeah, because like you've got regular expenses like wages. Everyone wants to be paid every month, and you have that. And you might be working to a milestone. Milestones are really easy. Like we'd work for a project base, and it's like, cool, the client's going to give us $200,000 January 1 for that milestone, and then salaries will be paid January 10. Great, and salaries are $50,000. Excellent. Then the client's sick or doesn't play, or you failed the milestone, you're not going to pay till February now. It's like, well, where does that $50,000 come from? Because I was going to use that $200,000. So it's just making sure you have, like you might be profitable because it's like, well, I'm going to have $200,000 in a month's time. I just don't have it now. But those expenses you can't push back. So there was times at Soap where I personally paid those because I could see the invoices coming and it's being processed by the client. But I can't say to people like, oh, can you just wait another week to get paid? So we pay that, and you work it out in the wash. But yeah, the cash flow is just basically like, unless you have if you have regular income coming in and regular expenses, and one's more income than expenses, that's easy. It's when you have those big jumps, and that's important when you're doing for gaming, because it's like we're going to work for 3 years, then we'll make money. Or if we get milestones, knowing when you're talking to your publisher or whoever's funding it, like don't just go, oh, we'll take at the end of that big milestone, we'll take $5 million. It's like break it into multiple chunks, because otherwise, the risk of them pushing it back could really ruin your business. And so, yeah. And one is just having, and that's why like don't spend every dollar that you get, because you need to have those times to weather the storm. And I find it much easier to make decisions where, people are like, hey, can I smash my computer? We'll get another computer. Like things that unexpected expenses, you're just like, oh, it doesn't matter. Versus like, oh, no, we can't even afford a computer. And they're like, well, I can't work. You make all these rash decisions, or like I said, cutting a deadline too short and stuff. So.
And even to negotiate that early payment or the installments. I know a lot of like creatives, that's what happens. They get the job and then for some reason there's no payment or it doesn't get finished, and then all that work they've done, they don't get paid for. So
exactly.
To be confident to ask up front for an amount.
Yeah, and that's why making smaller games is better, because like when we got originally funding from Screen Australia for that Games Enterprise. Of the 10 studios, we were the only one that hadn't shipped a game. Like we'd done hundreds and hundreds of Flash games, but that was like Defiant, Wicked Witch, all the others, but we were the risky ones. But our strategy was like, over the next 2 years, we're going to release 6 games. Oh no, next 3 years, we're going to, every game every 6 months. The feedback we got was like, maybe that's too ambitious, so we changed that to 1 game a year. And so that was our rollout. We did OTT TD, one more line. So we just had multiple games coming out versus like at the end of the 3 years, we'll release our game. So that was us kind of bootstrapping it that way. And then once we had that kind of cash flow, we were the first ones to repay our money back to Screen Australia. Then at the very end, we're on an email thread like, hey, is anyone paying their money back? Because they've shut it down. I'm like, oh, that's not fair. I paid mine back like 4 years ago, but they got out of it without paying anything. So, but that, we ended up getting $150,000 over 3 years, so not a huge amount, and then 50% of that was to be repaid back. But that was just enough to take people off full-time client work and give them a bit of a runway. So you've got 1 year to kind of work without being distracted. Because previously, one of the first games we did as Soap, we had a developer, Pat. He was every time he had some free downtime, he would do it. But it took us 4 years to make one game because he'd have like a month here, and then 3 months here, then 6 months later have another month. So, and that was us trying to manage cash flow as well. But that extra 150, or just saving up for that, the 150 wasn't enough. It was more just like that. That just takes the edge off, and we'll fund the rest of it. But yeah, I mean, that's any business cash. Like tradies have that, builders, like they're even more, because they have to buy all these materials beforehand, and they get screwed over by either things. So, but it is still important in games. And yeah, just making smaller bets and just slowly build up. Like people go like, oh, I'm gonna, even Naughty Dog and stuff, you look at their first games, they were tiny, but they've been around for so long. Just people want to jump in and make a big game straight out of the gate. And it's like, actually, the ones you all respect, like Activision and all that stuff, they made tiny games back in the day. It's just hard to remember that games back in 1994 and stuff are very different. Sorry, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yep, thank you so much for that. That was actually really, really cool. I've got a question on when you were talking about business structure and you brought up company partnerships.
Yep.
And Soul Trader wasn't on there, so what are your thoughts on for an indie dev starting?
Don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess yeah, plan. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Big success. You're then personally liable for all this extra tax, whereas a company can then spread it out, and company tax is much lower. So, and for the cost, like when we registered our business PTY, I remember the accountant saying it's probably going to cost about $5,000, and I was like, oh, but I can fill out the form myself for $800. So I literally I was trying to save money from the start. Like went into ASIC and put in the form, but that was just us as individuals. So the next layer is just like the shareholders are another company. So it's almost an extra layer. It just means if there's great success, you've got more flexibility of how you then divide that up. But Soul Traders, like you're essentially just it's all on you personally. And so if you make have huge success, the game makes $1 million, you're then paying personal income tax on $1 million. You can spread that out across multiple years as like an artist that spread out a few years, but like if it keeps making $1 million, it's like, man, I've now got this massive tax rate that I shouldn't have. And then you go, oh, I'll just give it to the company. Then you've got capital gains, like all these weird things. So yeah, for the extra bit of work, and you're able to write off more stuff as a company as well than a personal. When people say like, oh, I'm gonna claim my my console against my tax, like it's so much easier as a company to do that because a company would need a console anyway. When I'm buying groceries for the team to fill up the office, like you can't claim your groceries when you're sole trader. Not that I was doing that as Soap, but I was buying goodies for the office and stuff, and I don't think the AT is going like, yeah, how many apples did you buy? Like, is that a business expense? So you've got a lot more flexibility there. Yeah.
Oh, I'll just go through some of the questions online because they're stacking up real quick.
Okay, that's good.
How many staff did you have when you really felt like you needed to be the boss?
Yeah, I mean, a few steps was one where it's like, we need a person in finance, because I was doing all the MYB and all the invoicing. It's like, we need a person in finance. Like, they're not making any games. So even that was a bit like, oh, we need to hire someone just to do finance. So that was like a bit of a step there as well. But yeah, it was probably around the 15 people, and when at the very start, when you're starting up and stuff, you don't have anyone leave. It's like you're growing, like it's all good. And then when people like then leave and resign, and you're just like, oh, I'm actually, or you have to get rid of someone, like they're the kind of like, oh, it's not all fun and games, So it's kind of like when you have to make some hard decisions as well.
Good answer. If you could go back to the start, thinking of your co-founders and the overall work delivered and commitments, would you do anything differently with your equity split or founders agreement?
Oh yeah, 100%. Would have set it up again, either as a family trust or in a business. So just got more flexibility there. Even I'm the only founder from that original group that didn't get divorced as well. That adds a whole huge complexity. Part of being lonely and a workaholic at that time as well put a huge strain on relationships. I've got an amazing, like part of my success, definitely part of my success. Big part is my wife being very patient with me. But all the other founders got divorced. And like I said, one of the ones that left very early on to follow his girlfriend, they then broke up, 6 months later. So he got out. So that's one, is just setting it up so there's a lot more flexibility there. And then you'd save tax. Because when my accountant told me how much tax I had to pay when we sold the business, and you go, great. And then they go, oh, we have to go back and revise that tax year. And it's like, oh, what does that mean? And it's like, oh, you get this massive tax bill. And I'm like, oh, that's huge. And it's like, well, that's just for that year. And then you got another one this year. And you're like, oh, no. So I could have avoided a lot of that. And then from the equity split, like we kept it quite even, but I think it was just a choice of partners. Like at the time it seemed to make sense, but I think just having a little bit more robust language on if someone's doing fraudulent stuff in the business or, hurting the business, maybe you can't even legally do this, but just being able to kick them out easier, I don't know. It was literally like, part of that was like, we paid a massive amount of money to get this person out who was very bad to the business. Like literally like, hey, I'm going overseas, okay, and then why is there $20,000 taken out of the bank? Oh, I had that for expenses while I was in Cuba, like that's not cool. It's like, oh, we'll work it out when we do dividends, blah, blah. You're like, no, we didn't agree to that. And the stress of that then caused one of the other founders to go like, hey, I'm too stressed, like I'm out as well. So then it was a double one. So like I said, for 3-4 years, all the profits were just going to pay out 2 of these founders. One we wanted out and one just was collateral damage.
Can I personally just say thank you for going through all the company stuff, because I know there's a lot of studios that are popping up in WA at the moment that recently had to be companies to get the funding that they're receiving. Yeah. So there's like a lot of stuff that we don't really have the resources to teach that particular part in WA.
I definitely stumped, like we slowly grew. This has been since 2002, but I slowly grew into that management role. I think I would have also done a little bit more business management training, like New South Wales and stuff, or probably Perth as well, or Western Australia, have a lot of that like free business training, just answering these like simple questions. I definitely think that's important. Whereas, the shiny, like, oh, game design will be fun. It's like, no, even just how to legally hire someone as well. There's examples in Victoria where they've hired people on dodgy contracts, haven't been paying super and stuff because they just didn't realize, and literally breaking the law and stuff. So by sheer ignorance, but I think there's some really just fun, like just do some basic business training. And these are more like the top level kind of feel. Like it's more the emotional side of like running a business is really an emotional thing. So
yeah, it's really good. We can probably post some links in, not the Slido, but I'll send them out if anyone wants them to read further. How did you find the difficulty risk of your first few projects at SMG? Did you start with safety to establish things or go risky to light a fire under the business?
Yeah, so the first project, let me go back so you can kind of see the, yeah. So first project was OTT-TD, over the top tower defense. We'd previously made a Flash game using the same kind of framework. So we said like, we've already got a game design kind of structure. This is gonna be our first game. And that was meant to be 1 year. I think that took 1.5 years. Then the next one, which was one more line, that was our response. This was before hyper-casual really took off. Was like, all right, OTT-TD was a huge amount of art. We weren't ready. We didn't have a pipeline ready and stuff. And so we learned from that going, let's make the simplest game, 1 button, portrait, and very simple. And that one took 3 months. And one more line made 5 times as much money as OTT-TD. And so I think we went safety in terms of like we had an existing game idea, so it wasn't fresh. Wasn't totally, it was just like, how do we make our spin on it? And then we went safety for the second one of like, this needs to be like a prototype within a week. Okay, after a week, this is great, then get it out in 3 months. And then Gallipoli and the other one, that they would work for hire stuff, but then Dash, Risk was a SOAP one as well, so turned into SMG. So I think those two are kind of the, let's actually reduce the scope. We thought we were making a smaller game. We didn't take our own device. The next one we made the smallest game we could make with no language, like, there's probably like 5 words in the whole game, 1 button portrait, so yeah.
It's really cool. There's about 3 more questions, but I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you for your talk. I just had a question in regards to like the development work and hiring workers for that. How do you decide whether something can be done through like a contracted work or whether you should hire an employee to do a specific type of work?
Yeah, I mean, we've got both full-time, we have fixed-term contracts, and then we have some contractors as well. We haven't outsourced that much of our work predominantly, probably because we're not really good at managing that outsourcing as well. But I also like having that retained knowledge. When someone, I don't like the idea of a freelancer just all that knowledge just disappearing when they leave. But in terms of deciding, it's as the scopes got bigger and as we worked on multiple projects, it's like we hit that capacity. It was like we need another person, and then it became from sometimes as you go further down, like risk has people that are really good at just UI implementation, and then people who are good at like back-end implementation. So it became more specialized as certain projects came along. Whereas one more line and those ones, it's like any Unity game dev kind of fit that bucket. And then as we got bigger, it's like, oh, now we need tech artists that only specialize in that. So there's a little bit more subject matter experts coming in. But if you have a small project, then everyone, like the person who's doing the art also can do some tech art. The designer is also doing the UX, is also doing the dev. So at the smaller the project, the more you can kind of like multi-hand and jump around. And Thumbdrift is a very good example of that, where we had to when we made One More Line, my hardest issue was like marketing that because it was very abstract. Me coming from advertising, I thought everyone knew who Designers Republic was. People don't. So it was really hard to like find something to latch onto. So I said, the next game we do has to be a car game, because cars are so easy to target people on the internet. Like people love Subarus, or they love Ferraris, they love Lambos. So let's do a car game. Let's keep it portrait one-handed. And then we had to find 3D artists that were really good at cars, that knew it as well. Because you can have an artist who's like, can be a really good 3D artist, but if they don't know what makes a Subaru kind of cool, then they're just like, I guess I'll just make a Subaru, when they actually want to be doing knights and orcs and stuff. So, we specialized, found people who like really love cars and go, you'll know how to like stylize it and make it really fun there. So, yeah, as we grew, we got more specialization, like subject matter. And I became like, maybe 2013, I'd be like, why would anyone need a powerful car? Like, I think about a Golf, and I was like, that's like, you don't need anything more than that, whatever. And then doing Thumbdrift and like indoctrinating myself, watching YouTube, like we had YouTubers and influencers and just watching all their videos. And then I'd be like, ooh, that's a nice Supra. I basically turned myself into a car fanatic by doing these projects, because I didn't want to like fake it when I spoke to them. And yeah, so then I was like, it was weird. I became a subject matter expert on cars in a way. I have no idea how to fix them, but I do appreciate like a nice looking classic car and stuff.
We got a lot of ones come through online, but I'm just going to pick one that I think would be, because we just got time for one more, would be really interesting from a business perspective. When making Risk, how did you ensure people kept playing it through the years? How did you keep it fun?
Yeah, and Risk was a very interesting one. Like we were showing OTT TD at GDC. That was one of our, like we had a booth there in the GDC thing. Someone came past with their, Arthur from Hasbro came by and dropped his card. When I wasn't there, dropped his card on the booth and said, do you make strategy games? Give us a call. And I saw the card and went, oh shit, let me chat to Arthur. And said, oh yeah, before that we'd done OTT TD, but we'd done all these other strategy games. Like I said, we did something for Insomniac for Resistance 3. We did all these other titles as soap. So I had a pretty good portfolio of, we got that. And then we found out it was for Risk, and it's like, oh, I actually love Risk. I was a loser playing Risk by myself, as a kid. So we pitched for that. So how we even got Risk was quite a unique experience. And that was definitely happened because of soap days. And we basically had 1 week to pitch that in, because they're like, oh, look, we've already had all the pitches from other studios, but maybe we can give you an opportunity, but you need to pitch in a week. So I was like, we put together this massive deck and pitched within a week from Australia. And then they initially said, oh no, like we're going to go with the other studios we work with. And then like a week later they came back and said, actually, your pitch was so interesting, like we could see the passion, we'll go with it. Because in my slides, I would have like jokes in the slide. It was like almost like a stand-up routine in that, you know, I'd have like things popping up and things like that, and just went over and above, you know, like if even the other clients would be like, okay, just 10 slides, Ash, and I'd be like, look, I need 50, you know, so just, because it just shock and awe. So we won Risk by pure shock and awe, just over, you know, being so excited. But to keep that going all these years, again, it's a classic game, but we've just added, like, it's been a really iterative process where we just keep tuning and adding more features. And it's almost like we're getting, the next year is going to be good because you know, as you get to a certain point, it's like, oh, we need to refactor stuff. So there's a bit of time where it's like we have to go back 3 steps to go forward. But yeah, I think having the ability to refactor the code has helped us then add more features that we would have painted ourselves into a corner otherwise.
See, everyone, the importance of refactoring and making
Oh,
sure
yeah.
you keep time for it.
Yeah, and having that, if someone says like, I need, like Sandro came on and was like, I need 6 months to refactor this. It's a bit of a mess for the future that we want to take it. I'm like, oh, I thought we're just going to 6 more months of like no progress, but we had the stability to go, it's important, let's do it, and you know, it pays dividends. So.
And because you had the cash flow, you had the
Yeah.
option to do that.
Yeah, yeah, and we were very lucky with Risk because the way that worked is Hasbro paid us, it was a work for hire, Hasbro were publishing it, and then after a year, they said, look, we're actually a licensing company, we're not a game studio, so we're going to shut down the game, or you can buy it back. So we basically gave them the same money back. Again, having the cash to do this, like the money they gave us, we basically gave it back and said, we'll buy the game back off you, knowing that we could see the revenue that the game was making. So it's like, all right, you know, I have to pay all the money we got, but it should make that back in 6 months anyway because of the cash flow. And if we keep adding to it, that works. So again, very, very, very lucky circumstances in that. But again, having that kind of cash flow allowed that ability.
Thank you so much for that session. That was really cool.
Yes.
I saw everyone nodding along like so many times, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Ash. Thanks for coming all the way over for this. We'll be back in 1 hour with Kelsey Gamble from League of Geeks. We're super lucky because she's spoken at GCAP and GDC, and she's right here in Perth. Whoop, whoop. All right. See you in an hour.